On the Sabbath, as they were going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. And the Pharisees were saying to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" Hi, I'm Gary, and you're watching 7 Minutes in the Word. We live in a paranoid society. We see conspiracy in almost every phase of our lives. Like in George Orwell's 1984, we often feel that our words, our actions, our very lives are being scrutinized by those who are out to get us. We feel that we are being pursued by those who want to control us. We often feel insecure in our relationships with friends and even with family. And at times we feel that even our livelihoods are in jeopardy. And if our enemies can't get to us, well, we are fearful that they will go after our loved ones. Well, this may be a paranoid society, but in Jesus' day, and in Jesus' particular case, it wasn't paranoia. It was happening. When Jesus was in his home teaching his followers and healing the sick, the religious leaders had spies who were there to question his words. When Jesus was eating at a feast that was given in his honor, the religious leaders had spies there to question the company that he was keeping. When Jesus' disciples did not fast, the religious leaders had spies who questioned what Jesus was teaching his disciples concerning what they ought and ought not to do. It was just a matter of time before the religious leaders would go after those that Jesus loved. In Revelation 12, verses 1 through 6, when Satan was unable to destroy the Christ child, he went after the woman who is variously interpreted as being either Israel or the church. Satan went after those whom Christ loved. And that is what we see happening in today's lesson in Mark, the 2nd chapter, verses 23 through 28. The attacks brought against Jesus by the religious leaders had been unsuccessful. So they turned their attack upon his disciples. "Look, your disciples are breaking the law." Now, observance of the Sabbath was and is a cornerstone of the Jewish religion. The fourth of the 10 Commandments was, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." And Exodus 35, verses 1 through 3 tells us, "Moses assembled the congregation of the people of Israel and said to them, 'These are the things that the Lord has commanded you to do. 6 days work shall be done, but on the 7th day you shall have a Sabbath of solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death. You shall kindle no fire in all your dwelling places on the Sabbath day.'" While the Lord God was sparing in his specific Sabbath prohibitions, the rabbis were not. In the Mishnah, a written collection of the Jewish oral tradition, there is a list of 39 categories of forbidden labor on the Sabbath. On the Sabbath, one could not sew more than one stitch or write more than one letter. Concerning the harvesting of grain, a person could not reap, thresh, winnow, or grind grain on the Sabbath, according to the tradition of the rabbis written down in the Mishnah. Mark 2, verses 23 through 24 says, "On the Sabbath he was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. And the Pharisees were saying to him, 'Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?'" It is noteworthy that in Matthew's account he says that his disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. Matthew was one of those disciples, so he certainly should know what their motives were. But apparently the Pharisees were equating plucking and eating heads of grain with harvesting grain. And they asked Jesus about it. But Jesus did not respond to their question directly. Rather, he asked them a question. In Mark, the 2nd chapter, verses 25 and 26, we read this. "Have you never read what David did when he was in need and was hungry, and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God in the time of Abiathar the high priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and also gave it to those who were with him. Jesus' response contained two arguments that the Pharisees could not counter. First of all, King David was the revered king. He was the prototype of the Messiah to come. The Pharisees could have no objection to the actions of David. And David's actions were justified because he and his men were hungry, just as the disciples of Jesus were hungry. In his response, Jesus was also casting himself in the place of David, or more correctly, in the place of the coming Messiah. In Mark, the 2nd chapter, verses 27 and 28, "And he said to them, The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." God gave the Sabbath to man as a day of rest. It was to be a blessing. But the rabbis, with their oral tradition, had made it a burdensome curse. God meant for man to be freed from labor, but the oral tradition had made the Sabbath a labor of exacting rules. The disciples were hungry, and there was nothing in Sabbath law that made it illegal for hungry men to eat. Jesus also claimed for himself the right to decide what was and was not legal to do on the Sabbath. Jesus, God in the flesh, was the author of Sabbath law. He was the author of the Sabbath. And so Jesus knew better than any of his inquisitors what was allowed and what was not allowed on the Sabbath. Jesus was indeed the Lord of the Sabbath. Thank you for watching today. Please give us a thumbs up and click that subscribe button down in the lower right-hand corner. And please do join us again next week when the Sabbath controversy will come to a head.